the Anglican church in Lagos, had never felt so empty. I stood there in my white wedding dress, tears streaming down my face, watching as the afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows that danced across the wooden pews. Each passing minute stretched into an eternity as I waited for Ola to appear. He didn't. One by one, the guests departed with whispered pele, meaning sorry, with averted eyes, their elaborate gels and agbadas creating a somber parade of color through the church doors. My mother stayed until the end, her hand steady on my shoulder as the wedding flowers wilted in the Lagos heat. The carefully arranged hibiscus and roses, Ola had helped choose them himself, drooped as if they too understood the weight of abandonment. Yes, I had said without hesitation when he proposed, declaring my love. Ola had been the center of my world since our university days at Unilag, the kind of love that young girls whispered about during night vigils. We had planned everything together, from the traditional engagement ceremony to the white wedding, down to the small chops and jollof rice that now sat untouched in the reception hall. All those dreams dissolved into the hollow echo of my heels against the church floor as I finally walked out, still wearing my wedding dress, still clutching a bouquet that no one would catch. For 5 years, that day haunted me. The shame of being jilted was magnified by the whispers that followed me through the streets of Surulere. Our community was small and news traveled fast. Some blamed my family's modest background, others whispered about jazz, black magic. But I knew better. The truth was always more complicated than gossip could capture. I moved forward, throwing myself into my work at the bank, even found moments of joy in the company of friends who stood by me. But there was always a part of me frozen in that moment, the bride waiting for answers that never came. No calls, no messages, no explanation, just silence and the ghostly weight of unanswered questions. Then last year, a message arrived on my phone. The WhatsApp notification was unremarkable, just another ping among countless others. But the profile picture, that familiar smile, those kind eyes made my hands tremble. For a moment, I was 28 again, standing in my wedding dress, heart full of hope and fear. Ola's message was long, written in a mix of English and Yoruba that reminded me of our late-night conversations on campus. As I read, the years seemed to fall in on themselves, bringing me back to that sunny day in 2019. The explanation I had waited 5 years to receive began with three simple words: Mo Beru Sarah. What followed was a story of a young man's panic, of family pressure to marry someone from his father's village, of threats to withdraw support from his younger siblings' education if he didn't comply. He wrote of secrets kept too long and of regrets that had spanned years. Each word was a key, unlocking doors I had long since tried to seal shut. His confession wasn't just about that day. It was about every day since, about the life he'd lived, carrying the weight of what he'd done, about the courage it had taken to finally reach across time and try to heal a wound so old it had become part of who I was. The message ended with not just an apology, but with something I never expected: a request to meet. He was back in Lagos, he wrote, having returned from his self-imposed exile in Canada. He understood if I said no, but he hoped I might be willing to share a bottle of malt and a conversation 5 years in the making. I sat with that message for days, reading and rereading it until my eyes burned. The young bride in me wanted to block his number, to let the digital words disappear like the dreams that were never realized. but the woman I'd become, the one who had lived, loved, lost, and grown stronger, she wanted something else. She wanted closure. I found myself at Cafe Neo in Victoria Island on a Saturday morning, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. When the door opened, I looked up to see a man who looked both familiar and strange. Time had been kind to him, but changes were evident, like the way his face had filled out, or how his once carefree walk now carried the weight of responsibility. Ekaro Sarah, meaning good morning, Sarah, he said softly in Yoruba, and 5 years of questions began to find their answers. He spoke of his shame, of nights spent staring at his phone, thumb hovering over my number. He told me of his marriage to the village girl, a union that lasted barely a year before crumbling under the weight of its loveless foundation. He spoke of his escape to Canada, where he finally found the courage to stand up to his family, but by then he believed it was too late to make things right with me. As we talked, the busy cafe faded away, and we were just two people trying to make sense of the paths we'd taken. The anger I'd carried began to shift, not disappearing entirely, but transforming into something else, understanding perhaps, or maybe just acceptance. Sometimes the chapters of our lives don't close when we expect them to. Sometimes it takes 5 years to turn the page, but when we do, we find that the story isn't quite finished yet. Ola's message didn't change the past, but it did something just as important. It helped me finally understand it. An understanding I learned can be its own kind of healing. In Nigeria, we have a saying, Ojo gbogbo ki ense ojo ibi, meaning every day is not for sorrow. As I walked out of the cafe that day, I felt lighter, as if the Lagos sun had finally broken through 5 years of clouds. The weight of time hadn't crushed us. It had transformed us, teaching us lessons that only years could impart. Please subscribe and click the notification button for next episode.